What's strategic about a guy running away from a balloon parade? Maybe nothing, but when that guy appears in an Airbnb commercial, it's worth taking a closer look. At first glance, these new ads from Airbnb seem playful, even a little surreal. You've got co hosts in superhero capes, backyard saunas, and a parade of balloons surrounding a peaceful home. But look closer and you'll see something more calculated. You'll see that Airbnb is going beyond the act of growing its supply to perhaps creating one, maybe from scratch. These ads are recruiting a very specific kind of host. Homeowners who didn't realize they could just rent out their place for a weekend, or people who want to earn income from their home, but only if someone else handles the setup, the guests, and the cleanup. That's the story hiding inside all the whimsy. And that's what we're digging into today. Hi, I'm Yuvika Wahi from RSU by Price Labs, your trusted source for short-term rental news and insights, especially if you're a professional property manager. We are here to help you make sense of what the platforms are doing and what it means for your business. Today, we're unpacking Airbnb's latest commercials titled Nutfest and Sidekick, along with one more bonus. I'll dig into what these commercials are really saying, who they're targeting, and why it all points to a very deliberate supply strategy. Let's zoom out for a second. These new Airbnb ads might look like just clever marketing, but they are part of a larger effort to unlock a category of supply that most platforms either can't chase or don't want to. And honestly, who can blame them? This kind of host, someone who only wants to list for a weekend or won't consider hosting unless someone else manages everything, isn't easy to win over. Also, the cost of acquiring these listings can be too high to justify, especially when you consider the onboarding effort that comes with each new host. Most platforms just stay away from this type of supply altogether, but Airbnb is doing the opposite. And it's not just a campaign floating around without the infrastructure to back it up either. Airbnb has shaped its platform to support exactly this kind of host. First timers, part timers, and people who want to bring on co hosts from day one. It's created this ecosystem that lowers the barrier to entries and also sends a message that if you don't want to become a full time host, that's fine. We'll meet you where you are and we'll help you get listed anyway. What makes this move even more strategic is that these hosts aren't likely to turn up on other platforms. Also, this is a bit speculative, but it's a reasonable assumption if Airbnb is handling the onboarding, the co hosting, the payments, the education, the guest flow. Why would these hosts go anywhere else? That's a level of lock in that doesn't rely on exclusivity contracts, it just relies on simplicity. And yes, there's also a regulatory dimension here, which might be part of the reason Airbnb is leaning into short term event based listings in the first place. But we'll come back to that. Take the first commercial, for example, the one called Sidekick. It opens with a man carrying a giant cactus across his living room. The assumption is that he's trying to get his home ready to host, maybe hoping to earn a little money, but clearly overwhelmed. And then in comes a caped co host who swoops in and takes over, tidying up the house, staging it, taking photos, and saving the original host from doing literally any of the heavy lifting. It's chaotic, it's silly, it's relatable. What Airbnb is doing here is simple and strategic. It's acknowledging that one of the biggest reasons people don't host is because it feels like too much work, and then showing how that problem gets solved. This ties directly into the co-host marketplace that Airbnb officially launched last year, which it's continuing to expand. Through that platform, new hosts can find experienced co-hosts to help with anything from cleaning and guest messaging to dynamic pricing and full service support. You can choose exactly how much you want to hand off everything. And if this is your first experience hosting, where you barely have to lift a finger, it's easy to imagine why you wouldn't look elsewhere. For many of these homeowners, the goal isn't to become a full time host or to start a business. It's just to make their life easier, and they may not even realize that property managers exist outside Airbnb or that other platforms don't make this process as seamless. If you're a property manager watching this, it's worth paying close attention. Airbnb is building a framework that essentially replicates what many of you already do, but it's doing it within its own walled garden. That doesn't mean you're excluded. You cannot join the co host marketplace as a company, but individuals from your team can sign up and operate within it. And that makes these sidekick supported hosts important to watch because they're more likely to begin their journey with Airbnb and stay there. If their entire experience is designed around ease, flexibility, and staying hands off, the incentive to go multi channel just is not as strong. The second commercial is called Nutfest, and while the tone is lighthearted, the underlying theme is surprisingly specific and highly relevant to one of the biggest trends in the short term rental industry: event driven demand. Absent of something we've seen gaining momentum ever since the Taylor Swift tour sent demand surging in cities like Paris, something we've covered before and will continue to see because while traveling for events isn't new, the volume of people doing it and the role short-term rentals play in hosting them has clearly shifted. In the ad, you see a man enjoying a peaceful morning coffee by the window, and then suddenly a parade shows up outside. Balloons, music, the works, completely surrounding his home. Without hesitation, he heads out fishing while a woman, who is clearly a guest, enters with luggage and balloons to stay in his place. The messaging is pretty clear. If you live in a town where events take over, you don't have to just put up with the chaos. You can leave, rent out your place, and get paid to escape. And for Airbnb, this is a smart move. They're flipping the narrative from "we need supply" to "we can solve a problem for you." And in doing so, they're activating a kind of host who doesn't want to be in the game full time, but is happy to list during festival season or for a few high demand weekends a year. Again, for most platforms, this kind of temporary event based supply isn't worth pursuing. The onboarding costs are high, the listings are inconsistent, and the hosts often need more hand holding. But for Airbnb, it's a worthwhile investment. They've built the systems to handle it, and the payoff, high ADR, high occupancy bookings on peak dates, makes it valuable. There's also a regulatory upside here. A listing that's only active for a few days a year is far less likely to trigger a community backlash or regulatory scrutiny. In fact, in many cities, this is already a quiet norm. Locals leave town during major festivals, rent out their homes, and everybody benefits. So Nutfest isn't just a whimsical scenario, it's Airbnb positioning itself as the go-to platform for hyper-local, high-yield, low-commitment hosting. And while most platforms can't justify onboarding a host who only shows up for 3 days a year, Airbnb can, and clearly it is. The third and final act, called Vacation, is in Japanese and clearly aimed at the domestic Japanese market. It's less of a call to action and more of a mood piece, following a familiar Airbnb format where a photographer is invited to document a trip with friends through dreamy, soft-lit snapshots. In this case, we're watching a group of friends unwind by Lake Nojiri, taking cold baths, sipping coffee by the window, soaking in the sauna, all set to vintage music that leans into nostalgia. It's cozy, serene, and personal, and unlike the other two commercials, this one isn't about recruiting new hosts. It's about stimulating domestic travel demand. Airbnb is gently nudging Japanese travelers to explore regional, often overlooked destinations, aligning with its broader effort to grow beyond saturated urban markets. And it's not just an aesthetic play either. This campaign fits into a much larger strategy. Airbnb has recently partnered with Japan Travel Bureau, JTB, and Daiwa House to activate rural inventory and make vacant homes available for tourism. It's part of a multi-pronged approach, investing in photo-first, emotion-driven marketing across key international markets like France, Korea, and Japan, while simultaneously working to shape local regulations and infrastructure in its favor. So while the ad may seem like a quiet interlude compared to the more animated, host-focused spots, it's no less strategic. Airbnb wants more Japanese travelers on its platform, especially in places where it's betting on future growth. And vacation is part of how it gets there. So, what looks like a few quirky commercials, balloons, capes, saunas, actually gives us a pretty clear view of where Airbnb is going. It's not just trying to grow its host base in the traditional sense, it's engineering one from scratch. One weekend at a time, one co host at a time, one fishing escape listing at a time. And what makes this interesting is that Airbnb isn't chasing the obvious supply, it's deliberately targeting hosts no one else will chase. People who'd never list at all unless the platform made it absurdly easy, absurdly flexible, or both. That's what makes these ads worth paying attention to. Marketing pieces, yes, but they're also recruitment tools, onboarding nudges, and trust building signals, all wrapped in storytelling. And for professional managers, this isn't just background noise. If Airbnb succeeds in creating an entirely new category of casual, supported, short term hosts, these hosts will need guidance. They'll need cleaning, guest messaging, pricing, local insights, and they'll likely want someone else to do it for them. That's where you come in. Airbnb may be warming them up, but you could be the one to make it work. So watch these ads not as a viewer, but as a strategist. Because Airbnb isn't just advertising, it's laying that groundwork for the next generation of supply. And you might be part of how it scales. I'm Yuvika Wahi from RSU by Price Labs. If you found this useful, subscribe to our channel for more analysis and updates made specifically for professional short-term rental managers. And don't forget to sign up for a free weekly newsletter. It's where we break down the most important news from the week, strategies, and data into clear, actionable takeaways, straight to your inbox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.